After many attempts to get the sequel going for the original 1988 Beetlejuice film, it is 2024, 36 years later, and Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is finally here, and I'm here to share my thoughts with you all about the film, give you my review, and let you know if it's worth checking out. With that being said, he's back, and
the juice is loose.
get the conversation going in the comments below first, and let me know what you all think about the original Beetlejuice, and if you were excited to check out the sequel. And more importantly, once you've seen the sequel, let's talk about your pros and your cons, what worked, what didn't work. Do you want to see a third film in the franchise? And based on your experience with Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, which one is your favorite out of the two? Let's have those conversations in the comments below. So me personally, I'm a big fan of 1988's Beetlejuice, and as a kid, I always appreciated it, had fun with it, but it wasn't until I got older till I just completely fell in love with that movie. I think it's probably my favorite Tim Burton film, and I'm a Tim Burton fan. Whether it be what he did with Edward Scissorhands, obviously Beetlejuice, what he did with 1989's Batman, Batman Returns, Sleepy Hollow, just to name a few. I'm a fan of his work, but I think we can collectively agree that at a certain point in his career, he was just kind of lacking the imagination, the creativity, and pun intended, he was lacking the juice. But I think when he got attached to the Wednesday Project, directed a couple episodes of that, you kind of got the sense that he was coming back, and here we are coming back to this franchise 36 years later. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it great? Is it worth checking out? Well, let's talk about it. Starting off with my positives, and let's continue this conversation about the director, Tim Burton, who, in my personal opinion, this movie is his return to form. This movie is completely unhinged. It's wacky, it's chaotic in all the best ways possible, and to me, this is Tim Burton fully unleashed, and you get to see his full imagination on display. I'm just so happy that WB didn't put any restraints on Tim Burton and let him be himself, and they didn't make him fit into a studio format for movies that haven't been around in the mainstream in over 30 years. I mean, I think we've all seen these type of movies that it's been a long time since they've been in the mainstream zeitgeist, and when they come back, things just aren't the same. The style's different, they're checking off a box, it feels watered down, it's just a complete different experience, and they're just grasping and trying their hardest to recapture that magic, but they just can't do it. But when it comes to this film, Tim was able to fully bring his style, his flavor, his sense of humor, and his insanity to his sequel, and I love that for him. And for fans like myself of the original, this film is just a lot of fun. In collaboration with Tim's vision, much praise to all the incredible artists and production team to bring this film to life and really show us there's no limitations to this world, and their imagination again is on full display. I honestly feel like there's nothing in the theaters currently or even in this year that matches the same energy and the look and feel that this film has to offer. This is one of one. The practicality of the sets, the makeup, everything about this design is just flawless. Whether it be the sandworms, the blending of the CGI, it's all alive, it's all tangible, and it is incredible stuff across the board. One of my favorite things about watching movies, and movies like this in particular, with the energy that this film has to offer, is seeing these accomplished artists and actors just fully giving themselves into the project, putting their egos aside or putting what people think of them aside, and just being present, being in the moment, but more importantly, having fun while doing this. You can see the energy and the enthusiasm coming off of the screen, and them just giving their all to the project and respecting the project and servicing, again, the mood and the vibe that this film was going for. Now, sticking to that note and talking about the performances and the actors, who for the most part I enjoyed this cast, starting off with Winona Ryder, who's great in this movie. She's of course back as Lydia, former goth girl turned into a mother who also happens to be a host of a late night ghost show. Now, Lydia's trying to balance being a mom in this film, but she isn't that great at communicating with her daughter after experiencing a loss in their family. But again, I just feel like Winona Ryder did such a great job of bringing this character back to life, and she is fantastic, and she hasn't missed a beat in this film. Which, speaking of not missing a beat, Michael Keaton slips right back into the role like he never left from 1988. The comedic time in Michael Keaton is off the charts, the quick one-liners are hilarious, and he's just an incredible legend in this role. I can't tell you how many times I either laughed or just had a smile on my face whenever he was on screen. Now, without giving too much away, very similar to the original 1988 Beetlejuice, Michael Keaton's not in it a ton, but I'm okay with that because I like the way they use the character, and honestly, I think he might have been on screen more in the sequel than he was in the original, and I like how they used him, because it's one of those situations where it's like, oh, you think he's bad, but wait till you meet someone else. And there's a particular team up that I wasn't anticipating that I thoroughly enjoyed. But again, Michael's great. The comedic timing is phenomenal, and he does some pretty wacky stuff in this film that I just had a good time with. And again, Michael Keaton is just a GOAT. But my personal favorite, my MVP of the film, goes to Catherine O'Hara. She is just so perfect in the role. Like, just like the others who returned to their character, her timing was perfect. Her acting was on point. Her character definitely goes through a particular journey that was just spectacular. Again, everything that came out of her mouth, for me, again, comedy's obviously subjective, she was hitting the beats. Like, she had me in stitches in the entire film, and they do something with her, like I said, that's very interesting, and I just enjoyed the character, and for me, she was the MVP. Now, of course, we have some newcomers coming to the franchise who I quite enjoyed for the most part, but I think the standout for me, definitely from the newcomers, was Willem Dafoe as Wolf Jackson. He was a standout. Again, he's having fun in this role. I really enjoyed him. In transitioning, obviously, have a big star in Jenna Ortega, and I'll admit, I think her character definitely grew on me, and we'll talk a little bit more about her character a little bit later, but I liked her performance. The character, we'll talk about that here in a second, but, you know, we have Justin Theroux in the film as well, and I'll save him for later. But again, just speaking to the entire cast, everyone just fit into the film. They just came to have fun, and I had fun watching them on screen. Now, last points I have in my positives. Now, I will admit, this film has a lot going on for it, but I did like the subtlety and the themes and the story of handling grief and facing trauma, but also finding a level of acceptance when you lose someone close to you. That, to me, was handled in a way that didn't feel overused or overwhelming or forced. It worked pretty naturally within this narrative. And last thing I want to mention here, like, I genuinely had a good time with this movie. Like, as a fan of the original, like, this is a fun time at the theaters for me. Like, as I'll talk about here in a second, like, once the film finally gets going, like, it just hits the ground running. And just looking at it from a filmmaking standpoint, like, I just appreciate the craftsmanship of the filmmaking, the quality of the film. Again, the hair, the makeup, the practical effects are all fantastic. And honestly, man, like, just thinking about the joy I had in the theater, like, if I wasn't laughing, I had a smile on my face. And there was just like this feeling of feeling like a kid again, watching this movie, watching the original 1988 for the first time. And the thing that I just love about Tim Burton and his imagination is the idea of going back to being a kid and having those moments of not allowing your imagination to have limits on it. So this film is just fun to me. And I also want to mention that from a production standpoint, the movie has a great score. The soundtrack, of course, is fantastic. And the use and playing to nostalgia elements really worked for me in this narrative. But with all that being said, I do have my criticisms, which let's transition into that. Now, as I mentioned briefly, but it did take a bit for the film to really get going and find a solid rhythm. First half of the film plays a bit of catch up and the setup of why they have to return to the original house and why there's tension between Lydia and Astrid wasn't all that interesting to me, but luckily, all while that was going on, the stuff in the afterlife kept the first half like going. The momentum was at least going because all the stuff in the afterlife, Willem Dafoe, Beetlejuice, Dolores, who we'll talk about here in a second, like that stuff was entertaining, but the stuff on Earth was just like a little conventional and just wasn't as interesting for me personally. Next thing I want to talk about is Jenna Ortega's character Astrid, who again, by the end of the film, I was on board with the character, but it took me a while to really get invested in her story. Like, I understand where the character was coming from and what was going on between her and her mother, but for some reason, Jenna Ortega as a annoyed teenager just wasn't vibing with me in this film because it kind of came off to be forced in my opinion. And her story with another character wasn't all that interesting up until a certain point, but again, it was nothing from the performance, it was just how the character was written, where again, it took me a while to really get into what her character was going for. Now, sticking with characters and ones that didn't really work for me in this film, and it's not because of the performance, but more because of how the character was used, and that is Monica Bellucci as Dolores. Now, I'm pretty sure it's public knowledge of who Dolores is and her relation to another character in this movie, but just in case you haven't seen any trailers, I won't get into that. But what I will say about the character, again, it's not the performance, it's how she's used. Like, she's pretty much a plot device. And at times she's just kind of there and not given much dialogue. There's really not a lot to her story, not a lot of development in her character. Again, it's just a plot device, and she doesn't have a lot of material to work with. So to me, Monica Bellucci, icon, great actress, but she's kind of wasted in this movie in my opinion. That's going to be the end of my pros and cons. Before I get into my final thoughts and my score, I want to take this time to thank you all for making it to this point in the video. If you enjoyed yourself so far, do me a favor, hit the thumbs up. Consider hitting that share button and sharing this video with anyone and everyone you know that's interested in seeing this film. And last but not least, if you enjoyed yourself, consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel. Overall, now while Beetlejuice may take a bit to find its rhythm, but once it did, it's a wacky good time. This to me was a true Tim Burton experience with incredible sets, practicality, insane weirdness, and a cast that you can tell is having a blast. Michael Keaton doesn't miss a beat in the role at all. He's fantastic, but like I said earlier, Catherine O'Hara was a standout for me. This to me was definitely a good time, and I highly recommend you all check it out, especially if you're a fan of this franchise. I'm going to give Beetlejuice a 4 out of 5. Look, I rewatched the original before I saw the second one, and it just kind of re-centered myself to get back into the wackiness and the tone of Tim Burton, and it just, like I said, it was just like a perfect handoff from 1 to 2, so I had a fun time. I recommend you all check it out, and if you're a fan of the franchise, I think you're going to have a good time. If you're a fan of Tim Burton, this is him getting back to form, and all the characters, new and old, for the most part, are fantastic in this film. Like I said, I gave it a 4 out of 5 because it's a fun time, it's wacky, it's weird, and I just had such a blast with this film, and I'm excited to see it again, and I'm very curious to know if it's going to take another 36 years to maybe get a part 3, because the door is open for more stories to be told in the afterworld. But that's my thoughts on Beetlejuice. Let me know yours in the comments below. Again, thank you all for watching the review. You all stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.